The clock on the
Here are
wall of
your
the Sterling
options for
room showed
tonight's specials.
11:45 as
Can
Emma
I recommend the
Rodriguez
chef's
wiped down
favorite?
another table, her feet aching from the double shift she had volunteered for. New Year's Eve was always the busiest night of the year at the upscale Manhattan restaurant, and she needed every extra dollar she could earn. Her mother's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves, and the latest round of treatments had drained what little savings she had left. Emma paused for a moment, watching the elegantly dressed guests laughing and toasting with champagne that cost more than her monthly rent. She didn't feel envious, just tired. At 24, she had learned that wealth didn't guarantee happiness, though she had to admit it might make things a little easier. She smoothed down her crisp white server's uniform and headed back toward the kitchen, balancing a tray of empty glasses. Across the grand ballroom, Christopher Blake stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. The charity gala was in full swing around him, but he felt disconnected from it all. At 32, he had built Blake Technologies into a multi-billion-dollar empire, yet success had come at a price. His calendar was full, his bank account overflowing, but his heart remained empty. Everyone wanted something from him, whether it was money, connections, or a piece of his company. No one wanted just him. His business partner Thomas approached with 2 glasses of champagne, handing one to Christopher. The man looked genuinely happy, which irritated Christopher more than it should. Thomas had recently gotten engaged, and his constant state of bliss was a reminder of what Christopher had given up on finding. Thomas raised his glass toward the crowd. "You should mingle more, Christopher. There are at least 3 investors here who want to talk about the expansion plans." Christopher took a sip of champagne without enthusiasm. "It's New Year's Eve, Thomas. Can we have one night without talking business?" His friend laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. "You're the one who chose to come to a networking event instead of actually celebrating. When was the last time you did something just for fun?" Christopher didn't have an answer to that question. Fun had become a foreign concept somewhere between building his first startup and selling it for millions. Now everything was strategy, investments, and quarterly reports. He had forgotten what it felt like to simply enjoy a moment without calculating its value. The countdown to midnight began, and the room erupted in excited chatter. Christopher found himself checking his watch, already planning his exit. He would stay for the toast, make a generous donation to the charity, and then leave. Another year, another night pretending he belonged among people who only saw his bank account. Emma emerged from the kitchen carrying a fresh tray of champagne flutes just as the crowd began counting down from 10. She navigated through the guests with practiced ease, her smile polite but not reaching her eyes. She was tired, and all she wanted was to get through the next hour so she could go home and call her mother at the hospital. 9, 8, 7. The crowd's voices grew louder. Emma moved toward the windows where fewer guests had gathered, planning to offer champagne to the quieter attendees before the midnight rush. She didn't notice the small puddle of spilled champagne on the marble floor until her foot slipped. Time seemed to slow down as Emma felt herself falling forward, the tray tilting dangerously. She tried to regain her balance, but momentum was against her. The champagne glasses slid across the tray, and in her panic to save them, she crashed directly into someone solid and warm. Christopher felt the impact before he saw what happened. Cold champagne soaked through his expensive suit as the young waitress collided with him, her tray clattering to the floor. Around them, the final countdown reached 0, and the room exploded in cheers and celebration. But Christopher barely heard it. He had instinctively reached out to steady the woman, his hands on her arms, and now they stood frozen, faces inches apart. Emma's dark eyes were wide with horror, her cheeks flushing red. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She tried to step back, but Christopher's hands remained on her arms, steadying her. She looked down at his ruined suit, champagne dripping from the fabric, and her mortification deepened. "Your suit, I'll pay for the cleaning, I promise. Please don't tell my manager." Christopher found himself staring at her, completely forgetting about his soaked clothing. There was something about her genuine distress that struck him. She wasn't looking at him the way everyone else did. She wasn't seeing Christopher Blake, billionaire CEO. She was seeing a man whose suit she had accidentally ruined, and she was genuinely upset about it. "It's fine," he heard himself say, surprised by how true it felt. "These things happen. Are you hurt?" Emma blinked up at him, clearly not expecting that response. "I'm fine, but your suit must have cost more than I make in 6 months." She grabbed napkins from a nearby table and began trying to blot the champagne, her movements quick and embarrassed. "I really am sorry. This has never happened to me before." Christopher gently caught her wrist, stopping her frantic dabbing. "Please, it's just a suit." He smiled, and it felt strange because he couldn't remember the last time he had smiled genuinely at a stranger. "What's your name?" Emma hesitated, her eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether he was being kind or setting her up for trouble. "Emma Rodriguez." "Christopher Blake." He extended his hand, and after a moment, she shook it. Her hand was small and warm in his, and he found himself reluctant to let go. Around them, couples were kissing, friends were embracing, and champagne corks were popping. The new year had officially begun, but Christopher was only aware of the young woman in front of him, with her honest eyes and genuine spirit. Emma pulled her hand back, still looking uncomfortable. "I should clean this up." She knelt to gather the fallen glasses, and Christopher found himself kneeling beside her to help. "You don't have to do that," Emma protested. "You're a guest." He handed her the glasses he had collected. "Maybe I want to help." They stood together, Emma holding the tray of broken glass, and for a moment neither of them knew what to say. The air between them felt charged with something undefined. Emma cleared her throat. "I really should get back to work. Happy New Year, Mr. Blake." She turned to leave, but Christopher found himself speaking before he could think better of it. "Wait." Emma paused, looking back at him questioningly. Christopher reached for his wallet, pulling out several bills. "For the trouble." Emma's expression shifted, something proud and stubborn crossing her features. "I don't want your money, Mr. Blake. I apologized for the accident." She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the crowd of celebrating guests. Christopher stood there, holding the money, feeling something shift inside his chest. He had just met someone who didn't want anything from him. Someone who looked at him and saw a person, not a bank account. It was the most interesting thing that had happened to him in years. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Christopher couldn't focus on conversations, couldn't summon interest in the networking opportunities Thomas kept pointing out. His mind kept returning to Emma Rodriguez, to her dark eyes and proud refusal of his money. To the way she had apologized so genuinely for something that truly didn't matter. As the gala wound down, Christopher found himself looking for her in the crowd, but she had vanished into the back areas of the restaurant. He left generous donation for the charity and stepped out into the cold January air, the city alive with New Year's celebrations around him. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Christopher felt something other than emptiness. It was curiosity, mixed with something he couldn't quite name. He had met countless people, dated models and socialites, but none of them had affected him the way a clumsy waitress with pride in her eyes had managed to do in 5 minutes. The next morning, Christopher woke with Emma on his mind. He told himself it was ridiculous, that he was projecting meaning onto a simple accident. But throughout his morning routine, through his workout and his breakfast, he couldn't shake the memory of her face. By noon, he had made a decision that his logical mind told him was foolish. He was going back to the Sterling Room. He had to see her again. Christopher returned to the Sterling Room on January 2nd, telling himself he was being ridiculous. He was a billionaire CEO with board meetings and international deals to manage, yet here he was, walking into a restaurant in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, hoping to see a waitress who had spilled champagne on him. Thomas would laugh if he knew, but Christopher didn't care. Something about Emma had gotten under his skin, and he needed to understand what it was. The lunch crowd was sparse, and Christopher spotted Emma immediately. She was taking orders from an elderly couple, her smile warm and genuine as she listened to them debate between menu items. He watched her for a moment, noticing details he had missed during their brief encounter. The way she tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, the graceful efficiency of her movements, the kindness in her eyes when she spoke to her customers. When Emma turned and saw him, her expression shifted from surprise to wariness. She finished with the couple and approached his table cautiously, order pad in hand. "Mr. Blake, I wasn't expecting to see you again." Christopher gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please, sit down. I'd like to talk to you." Emma glanced around nervously. "I'm working. I can't just sit with customers." "Then I'll wait until your shift ends." Christopher had learned in business that persistence often won out over hesitation. Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why? What do you want from me?" The question was more astute than she probably realized. Christopher had been asking himself the same thing. "I want to get to know you. That's all." Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Men like you don't want to get to know women like me, Mr. Blake. You want something else, or you're bored, or this is some kind of game. I'm not interested in being anyone's entertainment." Her bluntness should have offended him, but instead, Christopher found it refreshing. "You're right to be suspicious. But I promise you, this isn't a game. There was something about our meeting that I can't stop thinking about. I'd like the chance to take you to dinner, just to talk. No expectations, no strings attached." Emma studied him for a long moment, and Christopher could see her weighing the risk. Finally, she shook her head. "I don't think that's a good idea. We're from different worlds, Mr. Blake. You'll realize that about 5 minutes into dinner and regret wasting your time." She walked away before he could respond, leaving Christopher sitting alone at the table. But Christopher Blake hadn't built an empire by giving up easily. Over the next 2 weeks, he returned to the Sterling Room regularly, always sitting in Emma's section, always leaving generous tips that she pointedly donated to the staff pool. They developed a strange rhythm of conversation, brief exchanges between her serving other tables, carefully neutral topics that revealed more than either of them intended. Christopher learned that Emma was putting herself through online business courses while working full-time. That she loved classic movies and terrible reality television in equal measure. That she had a mother recovering from cancer treatments and a best friend named Rachel who worked at a bookstore. Emma learned that Christopher had built his first company at 23, that he was an only child whose parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago, that success had cost him most of his friendships. The breakthrough came on a rainy afternoon when the restaurant was nearly empty. Emma brought Christopher his usual coffee and surprised him by sitting down across from him without being asked. "Okay, I'll have dinner with you. Once. But there are rules." Christopher set down his coffee, trying not to smile at her serious expression. "I'm listening." Emma held up one finger. "First, no expensive restaurants. Somewhere normal, where I won't feel like everyone's staring at us." Christopher nodded. "Second, we split the bill. I'm not a charity case." That one was harder for him to accept, but he agreed. "Third, if at any point I feel uncomfortable or want to leave, you accept that without argument. Deal?" Christopher extended his hand across the table. "Deal." Emma shook it, and this time when their hands touched, she didn't pull away immediately. There was electricity in that connection, something both of them felt but neither acknowledged aloud. Their first real date was at a small Italian restaurant in Emma's neighborhood, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and family photos on the walls. Christopher arrived in jeans and a simple sweater, trying to look less like a CEO and more like a normal man taking a woman to dinner. Emma wore a blue dress that brought out the warmth in her dark eyes, and Christopher found himself momentarily speechless when he saw her. Over pasta and wine, they talked for hours. Emma told him about her childhood, growing up in Queens with her mother, how her father had left when she was young. She spoke about her dreams of opening her own restaurant someday, creating a place where people felt welcomed and valued. Christopher shared stories about building his company, the failures that had preceded his successes, the loneliness that came with achievement. What surprised Christopher most was how easy it felt. Emma didn't treat him like he was special or untouchable. She challenged his opinions, laughed at his jokes only when they were actually funny, and called him out when he said something arrogant. It was intoxicating. As they walked through her neighborhood after dinner, the conversation turned more personal. Emma stopped in front of a small park, the streetlights casting long shadows across the empty playground. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice soft. "Why me? You could have any woman you wanted. Why pursue someone who spilled champagne on you and clearly doesn't fit into your world?" Christopher turned to face her, and the honesty in his response surprised even himself. "Because you're the first person in years who's seen me as just Christopher, not Christopher Blake the billionaire. Because you told me no, and no one tells me no anymore. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be human instead of a bank account with a pulse." Emma's eyes glistened in the lamplight. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." Christopher smiled sadly. "That's my life. Or it was, until I met you." They stood there in the cold January night, the city humming around them, and something shifted between them. Emma stepped closer, and Christopher's hand came up to cup her face. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma answered by closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, full of promise and fear in equal measure. When they pulled apart, Emma's cheeks were flushed, her breathing unsteady. "This is crazy," she whispered. "We barely know each other." Christopher rested his forehead against hers. "Then let's get to know each other. Give us a chance." Over the following weeks, they fell into a pattern. Christopher would pick Emma up after her shifts, and they would explore the city together. He showed her his world, taking her to art galleries and theater shows, teaching her about modern art and classical music. She showed him hers, bringing him to her favorite taco truck, introducing him to her friends, letting him see what life looked like outside the bubble of wealth. Christopher found himself wanting to take care of her, to ease the burden she carried. When he discovered through a chance conversation with Rachel that Emma was struggling to pay for her mother's latest round of treatments, he made a decision. He contacted the hospital anonymously and paid off Mrs. Rodriguez's entire medical debt, setting up a fund for future treatments. He thought he had been subtle, but Emma was sharper than he gave her credit for. She showed up at his office 3 days later, her eyes blazing with anger and hurt. "How dare you," she said, her voice shaking. "How dare you go behind my back like that?" Christopher stood from his desk, confused by her reaction. "Your mother needed help. I could provide it. What's wrong with that?" "Everything is wrong with that." Emma's hands were clenched at her sides. "I'm not some project for you to fix, Christopher. I'm not a charity case or a damsel in distress. I was handling it." He tried to approach her, but she stepped back. "Emma, please. I was just trying to help. I care about you." The tears that had been threatening finally spilled over. "Don't you understand? This is exactly why this won't work between us. You see a problem, you throw money at it. That's not how my life works. I don't want to be saved, Christopher. I want to be respected." She turned toward the door, and panic seized Christopher's chest. "Wait, please. Let me explain." But Emma was already walking out, and this time, she didn't look back. Christopher stood in his office, surrounded by the trappings of his success, and realized he had made a terrible mistake. Not in helping her mother, but in not understanding that Emma's pride was as important as her love. For a week, Emma refused his calls. She picked up extra shifts at the restaurant, threw herself into her studies, and tried to forget how good it had felt to be held by him. But Rachel wouldn't let her hide for long. She cornered Emma in her apartment one evening, arms crossed. "You're in love with him, and you're punishing him for caring about you." Emma wiped angry tears from her cheeks. "He doesn't see me as an equal, Rachel. He sees someone to rescue. I can't be with someone who thinks I'm broken." Rachel sat beside her friend on the couch. "Or maybe he's a man who's never had anyone to care for before, and he doesn't know how to do it without using the only tools he has. Money is his language, Emma. Maybe you need to teach him yours." The words stuck with Emma long after Rachel left. She thought about Christopher's face when he talked about his loneliness, about how he had admitted that no one wanted just him. Maybe they were both scared, both protecting hearts that had been hurt before. Maybe love meant taking risks, even when they terrified you. Emma picked up her phone and finally responded to Christopher's messages. "We need to talk. Face to face." Christopher's reply came within seconds. "When and where?" "Just tell me, and I'll be there." They met in Central Park, the same place where they had shared their first kiss. Christopher looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well. Emma felt her heart crack a little at the sight of him. They sat on a bench, a careful distance between them. "I'm sorry," they both said simultaneously, then laughed nervously. Christopher took a breath. "Let me go first. I'm sorry for overstepping. You were right. I tried to solve your problem with money because that's what I know how to do. But you're not a problem to be solved, Emma. You're an incredible woman who was handling her life just fine before I came along. I should have asked you what you needed instead of assuming." Emma reached for his hand. "And I'm sorry for running away instead of talking to you about it. I was scared. Scared that you would see me as less than you, that this was all too good to be true. I've spent my whole life being careful, protecting myself. Letting you in meant being vulnerable, and that terrifies me." Christopher squeezed her hand. "We're both scared. But Emma, what I feel for you is real. It's not about where you work or how much money you have. It's about how you make me laugh, how you challenge me, how you see the world with such hope despite everything you've been through. You make me want to be better." Emma moved closer, and Christopher wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Can we try again?" she asked quietly. "But this time, we promise to talk to each other. No more grand gestures without communication. No more running away when things get hard." Christopher pressed a kiss to her temple. "I promise. Whatever we face it together." They sat in the park as winter afternoon faded into evening, talking about how to move forward. Christopher admitted that his ex-fiancée had recently contacted him, wanting to reconnect. Emma confessed that her mother was worried about them being from different social classes. They discussed the challenges ahead, the judgments they would face, the difficulties of blending their worlds. But as they talked, something became clear to both of them. The obstacles were real, but so was what they felt for each other. For the first time in his life, Christopher had found someone who loved him for who he was, not what he had. And Emma had found someone who saw her strength, her intelligence, her worth beyond her circumstances. As they left the park hand in hand, Emma felt hope blooming in her chest. This wasn't going to be easy. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt. But for the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, love could bridge the gap between their different worlds. She just didn't know that the real test was still to come. 3 months had passed since Emma and Christopher reconciled in Central Park, and they had been the happiest months of Emma's life. Christopher had been true to his word, communicating openly, treating her as an equal partner. He sought her advice on business decisions, valued her opinions, and never again tried to solve her problems without asking first. Emma had opened her heart fully, allowing herself to believe that their love could overcome any obstacle. But life had a way of testing even the strongest foundations. The trouble began at a charity gala that Christopher insisted Emma attend as his official date. She had been nervous about the event, knowing she would be scrutinized by New York's elite, but Christopher had assured her that his world would embrace her the way he had. He had been wrong. The whispers started the moment they walked in together. Emma could feel eyes on her, hear the barely concealed gossip. Who is she? Where did she come from? Is she really a waitress? Christopher held her hand tightly, his jaw set in defiance, but Emma could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her. The evening grew worse when they encountered Victoria Ashford, Christopher's ex-fiancée. Victoria was everything Emma wasn't: old money, impeccably connected, raised in the same world as Christopher. She was beautiful in that effortless way that came from generations of privilege, her smile sharp as a knife. "Christopher, darling," Victoria purred, her eyes sliding over Emma dismissively. "I see you've been slumming. How quaint." Christopher's hand tightened on Emma's waist. "Victoria, this is Emma Rodriguez, my girlfriend. And I'd appreciate it if you showed her the respect she deserves." Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. "Of course, how rude of me." She turned to Emma with false sweetness. "Tell me, dear, what exactly do you do?" Emma lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "I work at the Sterling Room. I'm also studying business administration and planning to open my own restaurant someday." "How ambitious," Victoria said, her tone suggesting the opposite. "I suppose Christopher finds your determination charming. Though I wonder how long that charm will last when you realize you'll never truly belong in his world." Emma felt the words hit their mark, finding the insecurities she had tried to bury. The evening deteriorated from there. More subtle snubs, more pointed comments, more reminders that Emma was an outsider in Christopher's world. By the time they left, Emma's smile had become a mask, her heart heavy with doubt. In the car ride home, Christopher tried to apologize. "I'm so sorry for how they treated you. They're narrow-minded and cruel, and their opinions don't matter." But Emma stared out the window, Victoria's words echoing in her mind. "Do I really not belong in your world, Christopher? Are we just fooling ourselves?" Christopher took her hand. "You belong wherever you want to be. And I want you with me." Emma wanted to believe him, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The next blow came from an unexpected direction. Emma received a call from her mother's doctor requesting an urgent meeting. When Emma arrived at the hospital, her stomach churning with worry, Dr. Patterson delivered news that made her blood run cold. The cancer had returned, more aggressive than before. They needed to start treatment immediately, and the costs would be substantial. Emma left the hospital in a daze. She had barely finished paying off the previous medical debts, even with Christopher's help. How could she possibly afford another round of treatments? The answer was obvious, but it felt like admitting defeat. She would have to ask Christopher for help again. That evening, Emma went to Christopher's penthouse apartment. He took one look at her face and pulled her into his arms. What happened? Emma told him about her mother, about the cancer's return, about the impossible costs. And Christopher, being Christopher, immediately offered to pay for everything. "No," Emma said firmly, pulling away. "I can't keep letting you solve all my problems with money. This is my responsibility." Christopher's expression was pained. "Emma, your mother's health isn't about pride. Let me help. I have the resources, and I care about both of you." "But that's exactly the problem," Emma said, her voice breaking. "You have everything. Money, power, connections. And I have nothing to offer you except myself. How long before you realize you could have anyone, someone from your own world who doesn't come with complications and medical bills and a future that's so uncertain?" Christopher's eyes flashed with anger. "Is that really what you think of me? That I'm so shallow I'd leave you because life got difficult?" Emma shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I think you deserve better than someone who's always going to need your help, who'll always be the poor girl who got lucky. The argument escalated, both of them saying things they didn't mean, pain and fear driving their words. Finally, Emma delivered the blow she knew would end it. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe I don't belong in your world. Maybe we're just too different. She left before Christopher could respond, before she could see the devastation on his face. The next few weeks were the darkest of Emma's life. She threw herself into work, picked up even more shifts, started researching loans for her mother's treatment. Rachel tried to talk sense into her, but Emma had built walls around her heart again, convinced that walking away from Christopher was the right thing for both of them. Christopher tried to reach her, but Emma blocked his calls, avoided the restaurant when he came looking for her. She told herself it was for the best, that he would move on and find someone suited to his lifestyle. But every night, she cried herself to sleep, her heart breaking a little more. What Emma didn't know was that Christopher was falling apart without her. He couldn't focus on work, couldn't sleep, couldn't imagine a future that didn't include her. Thomas found him in his office late one night, staring at a photo of Emma on his phone. "You need to fight for her," Thomas said quietly. Christopher shook his head. "She made her choice. She doesn't want my help, doesn't want my money. What else can I offer?" Thomas sat down across from him. "Yourself. Your love. Your commitment. That's what she needs, not your bank account." The word struck something deep in Christopher. He had been so focused on what he could provide materially that he had forgotten to show Emma what she meant to him beyond his wealth. He needed to prove that his love wasn't about rescue or charity, but about genuine partnership and respect. Christopher made a plan, but before he could execute it, fate intervened. Emma's friend Rachel called him, her voice urgent. "Christopher, you need to know something. Emma's planning to move to Boston. There's a restaurant there that offered her a management position, and she's going to take it. She's leaving in 3 days." The news hit Christopher like a physical blow. He couldn't let her leave without telling her the truth, without fighting for what they had. He spent the next 2 days making arrangements, pulling strings, and preparing something he hoped would show Emma exactly how much she meant to him. On Emma's last shift at the Sterling Room, she moved through the dining room mechanically. Her bags were packed, her apartment lease ended. Tomorrow, she would leave New York and Christopher behind, start fresh where no one knew her as the waitress who fell in love with a billionaire. As the evening shift wound down, Emma's manager approached her looking confused. "There's a situation in the main dining room. A customer is requesting you specifically, and he's refused to leave until you see him." Emma's heart began to race. She knew before she turned the corner who it would be. Christopher sat at the same table where he had waited for her months ago, but this time the entire restaurant had been transformed. Every table was empty except his, covered in candles and flowers. Soft music played, and standing around the room were faces Emma recognized, her mother in a wheelchair, looking healthier than she had in months, Rachel grinning through tears, even some of the regular customers who had become her friends. Emma's hands flew to her mouth. "Christopher, what is this?" He stood, and she could see he was nervous, his hands shaking slightly. "This is me telling you that you're wrong. You're wrong about not belonging in my world, because you are my world. You're wrong about having nothing to offer, because you've given me everything that matters. And you're wrong about us being too different, because love doesn't care about bank accounts or social classes." He walked toward her, and Emma felt tears streaming down her face. "I've spent the last 3 months trying to figure out how to live without you, and I can't do it. I don't want to. I don't care if we face judgment from society. I don't care if people think we don't match. All I care about is you, Emma. Your dreams, your happiness, your future. And I want to be part of that future, if you'll let me." Emma looked around at the faces of everyone she loved, all of them nodding encouragement. Her mother was smiling, looking stronger than Emma had seen her in months. "But what about my mom's treatment?" Emma whispered. How can I ask you to take that on? Christopher took her hands. You didn't ask. I'm offering. But this time, it's different. I'm not trying to solve your problems or rescue you. I'm asking to be your partner, to face life's challenges together. Your mother's treatment, my business pressures, whatever comes our way, we handle it as a team. That's what love is, Emma. It's not about one person being the hero. It's about two people being strong enough to lean on each other. Emma felt something break open in her chest, all the fear and doubt she had been carrying dissolving in the face of his honesty. But Boston, the job, she started. Christopher smiled. I spoke with the restaurant owner. He's actually a friend from business school. The job was real, but he agreed to hold it for you while we figure this out. If you still want to go, I'll support that decision. I'll even move there with you if that's what you want. But please, don't run away because you're scared. Be scared and stay anyway. Choose us, Emma. Choose love. Emma looked into his eyes and saw her future reflected there. Not a future of wealth and privilege, not a fairy tale where all problems disappeared. But a real future, with real challenges, built on real love and mutual respect. She thought about how Christopher had changed since they met, how he had learned to see beyond his money, to value partnership over power. And she thought about how she had changed too, learning to accept help without seeing it as weakness, to believe she was worthy of love despite her circumstances. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Christopher cupped her face gently. So am I. Loving you terrifies me, Emma. Because I've never had something this precious to lose. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. Emma made her choice in that moment, not out of need or desperation, but out of love and hope. She kissed him as applause erupted around them, their friends and family celebrating the victory of love over fear. When they pulled apart, Emma was laughing and crying simultaneously. I'm not going to Boston. I'm staying here. With you. Christopher pulled a small box from his pocket, and Emma's breath caught. I was going to wait, do this properly. But I can't hold it in anymore. He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. It wasn't ostentatious or overwhelming, just beautiful. Emma Rodriguez, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, face the future with me, love me even when I'm difficult and stubborn and probably too generous with my money? Emma nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Yes, she finally managed. Yes to all of it. Christopher slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Because it had been, in every way that mattered. The celebration that followed was nothing like the cold charity galas of Christopher's world. It was warm and genuine, filled with laughter and tears and people who loved them both. Emma's mother hugged Christopher tightly, whispering thank you for loving my daughter. Rachel teased them both mercilessly, already planning the wedding. And through it all, Emma and Christopher held each other close, grateful for second chances and brave enough to take them. Months later, as winter gave way to spring and then summer, Emma and Christopher built their life together. She enrolled in culinary school full-time, with Christopher's support but her own determination. He learned to step back and let her handle her own challenges, offering advice only when asked. They fought sometimes, struggled to blend their different backgrounds, faced judgment from society. But they also laughed, dreamed, and loved with an intensity that surprised them both. On the first day of the following year, exactly 1 year after they met, Christopher and Emma stood in the Sterling room surrounded by friends and family. The restaurant had been transformed for their wedding, elegant but warm, a perfect blend of both their worlds. As Emma walked down the aisle in a simple but stunning dress, Christopher felt his eyes fill with tears. When they exchanged vows, Emma spoke from her heart. I fell in love with you on the first day of the year, but I fell deeper in love every day after. You taught me that love isn't about being saved or saving someone else. It's about choosing to build a life together, through good times and bad, with honesty and respect and partnership. I choose you, Christopher, today and every day. Christopher's voice was thick with emotion as he responded. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, not because you need me, but because you choose me. You taught me that wealth means nothing without someone to share it with, that success is hollow without love. You are my partner, my equal, my everything. I fell in love with the girl on the first day of the year, and I'll love her until my last day on earth. As they kissed, sealing their commitment, Emma realized something profound. Their love story hadn't begun with a fairy tale meeting or ended with a grand gesture. It had started with spilled champagne and built through honesty, struggle, and choice. It was imperfect and complicated and absolutely real. And that made it more beautiful than any fantasy could ever be.